Welcome to an all-new episode of Get Lit with Lianna, the podcast. Join me as I sit down with a new guest author in each episode to discuss their books, careers, and everything in between. Today, I'm joined by Canadian romance author Romi Moondi to chat about her new book, 24 Hours in Italy. Romi's writing background is super interesting because she started as a self-published author, moved to Wattpad, and now is published traditionally. I love chatting with her about both of her books, and I love getting to know more about her travel adventures and how she kind of incorporates them into her stories. This was such a fun conversation. It felt like I was catching up with an old friend, and I know you're going to love this one too. So without further ado, my conversation with the very talented Romi Moondi starts right now. Welcome, Romi, to the podcast. I'm very excited to have you here because we've been chatting via Instagram for well over a year now. And I love having Canadian authors on my show, especially authors that have a different type of writing history, background, trajectory. And I know yours is a little bit different. And I would love to firstly welcome you on the show, but kind of just jump right in and talk a little bit about your writing background and kind of how everything started.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. So yeah, let's jump right in. I'm going to take it way back to the blogging days of 2007, really aging myself here, but I was super into that. I was blogging like 3 times a week. And then I themed one of my blogs for, dating as a South Asian with strict Indian parents, because I thought that would be fun. And then that set off the idea for my first novel. And, I'll skip the boring parts, but learned everything I could about writing, read Stephen King's On Writing, all the things that one does. And then, at that time, I got the big physical book of all literary agents. It was like an encyclopedia. You buy it at Indigo. It wasn't online. And I was literally highlighting. And I'll have to compress that part as well. But basically, over 100 rejections. Later, a very brief stint with an agent that was so not for me. But at that point, I reached desperation, which we can all relate to. But luckily, I woke up pretty quick and we amicably parted. So then I guess 2011 was learning everything I could about self-publishing, which was very much becoming a thing with Amazon Kindle publishing. So I self-published the first book, and so I was manually reaching out to book bloggers, which are very big. So this was well before Book Talk. It was all on blog. And soon after Wattpad found me, it was at the time a very new startup. And they had seen my book reviewed on a book blog. And at that point, I had just released the second rom-com in the series. So I had a strategy, give away the first one free, get people hooked, and then I could price the other one higher, which for self-publishing is still very low, $3, right. But you get 70% royalties. So it's great.
For sure.
So then I was of course, I'll also put it for free on this platform to find a totally different audience. It was a win-win. So I continued on with that series. I published the third by 2013, which I did in Paris because that one was set in Paris, but I had never even been to Europe. So I was well, guess I have to quit my corporate job and move to Paris for 6 months and pull an Ernest Hemingway, which I totally did.
That's wild.
It was amazing. Yeah. And I sold 15,000 copies. So I was pretty proud of myself to have done all that on my own. Yeah. And meanwhile, I was writing for fun on Wattpad. But then also when I came back, I was basically broke, low key. So, but I didn't want to go back to the corporate world. So I thought, okay, what can I do that's writing adjacent? Yeah. So then I got into freelance proofreading, then into copywriting, which I still do now, which is great. And then anyway, the relationship with Wattpad continued over the years. I would sometimes do paid branded opportunities and cool things like that. And when they launched their adult imprint, that's when they approached me and said, would I be interested in aging up one of my sort of YA stories called 24 Hours in Paris and launching it with a W imprint? And then that happened last year at 24 Hours in Paris launch.
Crazy. So I know that you've been kind of open about the fact that the book on Wattpad was very different than what the book actually was when it was published. Like, what kind of tweaks did you have to make in order to make those changes? And was it simply because it was more of a YA story and you wanted to make it more mature? Like, what were the actual changes you made?
Yeah. So I guess they were college students. And so once I started looking into the amount of rewrites that would be needed, I was like, oh, so it's a page one rewrite. It just had to be because then it's like now the main character is 35. She works in branding and now they're on a business trip and not a school trip. So I had like that moment with myself, the look in the mirror moment where I was like, you can either try to hack this thing apart and salvage it and put it back together and it'll into some kind of Frankenstein
A
thing.
Frankenstein book.
Or you can like be real with yourself and know that it's still going to be 24 hours in Paris. You can still use all the locations, but it's a whole new story and you're going to hit the deadline with a full-time job. And so we just had to have that real talk.
Insane. And then obviously, I guess it was like, no question, you were going to stick with Wattpad. What has it been like working with Wattpad now as like a published author, not just online stuff, like actually having a physical book?
It's so weird because so many of the moments take me back to that girl sending out those query letters and highlighting in yellow in her physical literary agent book.
So funny. Yeah.
And never making it. And then seeing my book in an Indigo last year, like as a Canadian author, it was just like the culmination of, I guess, like 13 years of this journey. It was incredible. And, in Wattpad, there's just like so many different things. Like they have their own annual conference. So like I got to go to LA last November and do Wattpad specific panels. I've also been sent to like trad publishing things like at New York Comic Con last October. Just been so many cool things. So it's kind of like I got to do all those things that I never got to do when I was self-published. But then there's like the community of writers and people I know from Wattpad and like different opportunities as well. So it's been like a really cool kind of like trad / hybrid experience.
It's so different from so many people so many authors, I guess, that I've spoken with. But what's so different about your new book, 24 Hours in Italy, is it's a continuation of your first book, 24 Hours in Paris, but it can also be read as a standalone. And normally when there's like books in a series, I find that you don't get what you included in your book. Like, in case you didn't read it, this is what you missed in the first book.
Oh,
like
yes.
a very like condensed, but totally accurate recounting of the first book. Like, why did you want to kind of have it in that way? I guess like it's very interesting that it's a story. It's a continuation, but it can also be read alone. Like, how come you wanted to do that rather than just leave it as part of a series and you need to read book 1 to read book 2?
Yeah, that was such a weird but cool thing that we had talked about. Like with my editor, we were kind of like, so there's going to be a time gap, but it's also contained like the first one in 24 hours. Now it's on the Amalfi Coast. And then so we were talking about like our types of readers. Like some people are obsessed with Paris. Some people are obsessed with Italy. So I didn't want to alienate in that way. Like if like the cover is beautiful and if people see it in a bookstore and then they feel like, oh crap, like I haven't read the first one. And then we were right. Like we were also talking about like, through the pandemic. I mean, I must have watched a million shows on Netflix. Just gobbling them up. And I started to notice that every time they had a new season, they would do like this sort of here's what you missed recap trailer. Yeah. And I thought that is so handy, because I don't remember like the previous season of Never Have I Ever or whatever. And it just caught me all up. And so, yeah, we thought, why don't we just do it? And then if people read it, great. If people want to go back after and read 24 Hours in Paris as like a prequel, they can also do that.
It's like so perfectly done. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
Like the way you do it, it works. And it's so interesting because series normally don't work like that. And I guess maybe it's the story itself, or maybe it's the fact that each book only takes place over 24 hours. So it's not like it has this huge big setup and background, and it's not like it's multiple timelines and stuff. And maybe that lends to some of like the
think
eagerness
that
of it.
helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. It's amazing. I mean, I obviously read both books, but I'm going to encourage anybody that has not picked up the Paris book, like go ahead and you could read Italy first. Like it honestly doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's sort of like, when you're online and you're like about to buy an airplane ticket and you're like, which destination do I want to go? So it's sort of like, what's your vibe? And based on that, if you're really vibing Italy this summer, which I feel like ever since White Lotus, the latest season, like everyone's vibing Italy.
Yeah.
So go ahead. You can come back to the other one later. It'll be here for you. Just we're all inclusive here.
I love it. Okay, so before we go any further though, can you give everyone listening kind of like an elevator pitch about what 24 Hours in Italy is about?
Sure. So 2 years have passed since 24 Hours in Paris, where Mira and Jake, the very opposite coworkers who didn't really like each other at first, had a whirlwind 24-hour romance in Paris. And by the end, it was so clear that they were falling for each other. But the ending was just sort of like, to me, it was a happy ending because it was full of possibilities. It was like, who knows what can happen? And so now the book will kick off with a prologue, which will catch you up on those 2 years, which will also include a very fun New Year's Eve party in Brooklyn, just so you know, because some people are like, I don't want to read a prologue, but it's a fun prologue. And basically, so when they were in Paris, they met this couple, this French woman and her boyfriend, and they immediately hit it off with them and they took them all around Paris. So they're getting married now on the Amalfi Coast. So Mira and Jake, we'll just say for now, have not seen each other in a while. That's all we're going to say. And they collide on the Amalfi Coast. And it's all about finding out in those 24 hours, are they going to find closure, or are they going to find that the spark is still there? Yeah.
And guess what happens? Anyway, so, tell me about the decision to put this book 2 years in the future, because obviously the Paris book ends kind of cliffhangery, like what's going to happen. So we kind of knew that something else was coming, another book was coming. So how did you kind of decide the timeline for this story?
Well, I wanted to create like a valid premise for why they might not be together anymore. So I needed to throw one of their lives into chaos. I'm not going to say who, because you have to read the book to find out. And I also wanted to explore some of the South Asian family dynamics, which were talked about a lot in the narrative of 24 Hours in Paris through like flashbacks and memories. But we didn't get to experience it because it was 24 hours in Paris. And it would be weird, like if her parents were chaperoning her around Paris.
Yeah.
So I thought that would really be a great way to ground the character and just to really add maximum tension about why aren't they just together? Like,
right.
So,
So you actually kind of just touched upon one of my next questions, but obviously both of these books have very strong South Asian representation. Why was that something you wanted to include in both of these stories? And I imagine it's something you're going to continue to include because you write it so well, but tell me a little bit about that decision and kind of the importance behind having diverse characters in romance books in 2023. I don't know why this is still like a question or like a highlight, but here we are.
Girl, why are we still talking about it?
Yeah.
And not just even for South Asian, but any marginalized group. Yeah. But it's okay. That's like a side rant, but
well, like, I mean, I have this conversation all the time because I'm Jewish and my favorite thing ever in the entire world is to read Jewish romances. And thankfully we're getting more now, but it's literally in the last 2 years. So I just, for any marginalized group, I'm just like, we have to talk about it. We have to we literally have to highlight the fact that this is included because it's so hard to find these days.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess for me, it all traces back to, again, that girl querying literary agents because all those rejections, and it just made me feel like, oh, so it's 2010, it's Sophie Kinsella's world. I'm just living in it. Nobody wants a South Asian rom-com. So it just made me feel like, oh, okay, like there's no space for us. And that's why, like, when I self-published, that 3-book series is a South Asian lead, because I was like, okay, well, if you're not going to let me do it, I'm going to do it myself. And then when I ended up selling like 15,000 copies, and it's so crazy because like 10 years later, people were messaging me on Instagram. I read that series and now I'm going to read 24 Hours of Paris. And I was like, you still
Oh,
remember me?
that's wild. That's amazing.
So yeah,
That must feel so good. Like,
honestly, those are the moments that like make me cry, like people can talk about, New York Times bestseller list. Of course, that's a dream.
yeah.
But those little moments, like those special DMs are just so meaningful. And anyway, so over the years, I started to feel like, of course, there's an audience for this. And then so when the time came for 24 Hours in Paris, I will say I'm happy to see that there are more romance books with South Asian authors and representation. Like one of the ones I love is Nisha Sharma. I follow her on Instagram and I DM her. Sometimes she DMs me back. She's so nice. So I'm very happy to see that there's more, because I do want to acknowledge that, because I'm like, I'm not here trying to say that I'm the first to do it. Like others are paving the way, and I'm really grateful for that. But the way I always look at it is, okay, so this is a percentage of the population that is us. And until romance books represent that percentage of the population, there's still a gap. So I will keep going with my next book and my next book. Yeah.
I love it. I love that so much. And you obviously should, and you will. But another thing I love about this book is, and your first book also, or the Paris book, is how every chapter is an hour. And it's like taken hour by hour. And it's just such a fun way to like break down a book. When you hear of a book that takes place over 24 hours, I feel like a lot of times they're like, okay, people are just like, I feel like I'm not going to get invested because it's such like a quick story. Like I'm not getting a big background. I'm not getting a full history. But when there's something like different about it, and the fact that it's 24 hours and you're getting so much detail because it's hour by hour each chapter, it adds so much to the story. So what's that like to write, and how did you kind of decide that this is the strategy you were going to go to write this type of story?
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm glad it seemed like meaningful hours attached together, and not just like, okay, now I'm going to like eat a croissant and go to the bathroom, and then an hour went by and nothing happened.
No, like every hour packed a punch. They were very busy.
Very busy. And so first, even with the college student version on Wattpad, it was very inspired by my travels living in Paris. So after the first year where I lived there for 6 months, I'm kind of obsessed. I've been to Paris like 11 more times, and I'm going in like 7 days again. A little obsessed. And so I could draw from that because it was so vivid in my mind. And then when I outlined for the grown-up version, so at each chapter had the outline hour. So I had the location, but then I also had to put something emotional or a problem that had to happen in every hour.
It's a hard outlining process. You're like, you've made more work for yourself.
Also, I'm such a type A nerd that I was literally on Google Maps. How long does it take to walk here and go here? Because I'm like, there will be no, oh, we were at Moulin Rouge and then we were at the Eiffel Tower. And I'm like, girl, that takes too long. That'll take you the whole time to get there. So
I love that. No, there's like real planning that went involved. So this kind of is a perfect segue to the whole like escapism part of your books, because it really does like take you on a trip. And I'm somebody who, I'm ashamed to admit, I've never been to Paris nor Italy. I had a layover in Paris once, but that's as far as we've gone. But I've never traveled to either of those places, and I'm dying to. But I love that like I got to experience those places like through these characters' eyes and their lens. Why is that something like, what about having travel and being such a character in the story? What is that draw for you? And why did you choose to include that in both of these books?
I guess because when I was younger, the escapism was so important to me, because growing up, with a strict upbringing, I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things that other teenagers and whatever was doing. So I go in a library and I'm reading books and I'm escaping through that. And so then I got into the corporate world, and it like didn't end. Like everyone needs escapism. Like adulting is a lot. So the great thing is, so like even if you haven't been, if you decide to go one day, the great thing is, so like 24 Hours in Paris that is chronologically, but by hour, a real tour you can do. And in May, you can see in my Instagram highlights, I took over my publisher's account and we did the tour. And so it's
That's
still there in my IG highlights. So you can like map it all out if you decide to go. Same thing with 24 hours in Italy. You can pack in all those things in 24 hours. And then at the end of the book and the bonus content, there's like a full itinerary for 24 hours.
It's
Because I
amazing.
want people to either virtually escape, but then maybe plan a trip in the future. Because a lot of people have DM'd me that like, oh, I never really thought about Paris before. I didn't think I needed to go, but now I'm like going in September.
It's insane.
And I
You're
was like,
literally
wow.
a travel agent.
I know. I kind of want kickbacks from the tourism board of France. Like, I think I deserve it.
No, you should know what you should do. You should do some sort of like thing also for Canada and like work with like Tourism Montreal and Tourism Toronto and like plan tours for people and make people come to Canada and like read Canadian romance books somehow.
Okay, that is a great idea. A, I'm gonna
I'll help
steal
you.
it. B, I will also give you a percentage for inventing it.
Oh, I love a good kickback. No, but obviously this book is like so much travel and it's incredible, but like we can't oversee the whole part of it being an amazing love story and such a fun second chance romance. Tell me about your love for that trope. Why did you want to make it a second chance in this book in particular? Like, tell me all of the romancy gushy things writing the story.
Oh, I felt so many feels. I was telling my publisher, like, okay, each time I was working on a rewrite or copy edit, even the final proofs,
Yeah.
there were certain parts that, like, I would get teary-eyed no matter how many times I read it. And I only hope that the readers will be all up in their feels. But basically, I just love the second chance romance trope because I feel like when they're around each other, but they're not together, and the things you can do with
Yeah.
attention,
Yeah.
it's so fun to write. It's so fun to read. And one of my favorite movies is the Before series. So I love the Before series, you know, with
No, I'm
Ethan
literally
Hawke.
dying because when I was reading both of these books, I that's exactly what I was imagining.
Yeah, because Before Sunset is the second one.
Yeah.
So it's set in Paris, so it would make you think of 24 Hours in Paris. But the reason why it reminds me more of 24 Hours in Italy, because that is like their second chance romance. They are reuniting after like 10 years or something. And every time I watch that movie, I just feel so much, even though they're just walking around talking, because
No,
there's
there's
so
no
much subtext.
Romy, I'm dying because I actually just had a conversation with somebody who I work with about this movie because she's a bit younger than me and she'd never seen it. And my boss was saying how like it's an amazing movie and like she maybe really would enjoy it. And I was like, but also, I just feel like some people are not meant to like watch movies that have no plot and are literally just dialogue. And that's
Oh,
obviously what these are. And I'm like,
yeah.
she will be pulling her eyelashes out, like won't be able. I'm somebody because I'm a romance reader and all I die for is dialogue. I sit there with a fork and knife, like eating this shit up. Like I'm obsessed with it. So like,
Oh, I put on my little bib and I'm just ready to gobble it up.
exactly.
I love it. And I have also like in my free time over the years, I've written screenplays as well. So I worked a lot on dialogue and stuff. So I hope like the witty banter comes
Totally
through.
translates. Yes.
But for girls like her who pull out their eyelashes, I will say that there's also a lot of plot. Someone gets thrown off a yacht.
No, I was saying in the movies, in the Before series, not
Oh, yeah.
in your
No,
books.
in the Before.
Your books are friggin' every chapter is an hour. Let me reiterate. That's not what I was saying.
No. Yeah. But like so like I guess to those people though, I would say that we'll give you all the dialogue,
Yeah.
but then we'll load you up with like crazy scenes and things as
No,
well.
it's
But
so-
yeah, for me, I don't need any plot whatsoever. Like just give me an hour and a half of
No.
talking.
No, it's horrible. I mean, it's amazing, but it's like such a serial killer trait to have. I feel like just to be a fly on the wall and just watch people converse, like that can't be normal thing to like to do.
Oh
but-
no, we are very voyeuristic and we need therapy.
Is what it is. Okay. So I heard through a little birdie in the grapevine because I only received a digital copy of this book and for whatever reason it was not included. But I heard that in the physical copy, there is bonus content in the back.
Right. You're right. You wouldn't have seen that in the
I haven't
art.
seen it, but I'm really excited for everyone that's going to get a physical book. And apparently my physical book is on the way. So I'm very excited to receive.
Yay.
But there's some like cool bonus content in the back that I would love for you to share a little bit about and kind of the decision behind that because it's so different and cool.
Thank you. Yes, there is. Because, one of the things was, inflation. I want to give people a lot of value, like straight up. Your money is being well spent, first of all.
It is.
Secondly, and I forgot that you hadn't received it because I was saying it to you like you knew about it, but there's the itinerary for how to spend a perfect 24 hours in Amalfi, right down to where you should stay, the transportation, where you should eat. And then, so I went to Amalfi almost 6 years ago, and we went to this restaurant, and they had this dish called lemon pesto spaghetti. And I was just like, oh yeah, we're in Amalfi, lemons, let's try it. I've been to Italy like 6 times now. It's the best thing I've ever eaten in Italy, maybe ever. We went back the second night and we had to wait for a table. And I was like, I don't care. I had to eat it again. And it's family owned. The brother and the sister, they were so nice. And the second night when I went, I was just like low key asking, like, oh, this tastes so good. What's in this? What's that flavor? I was like trying to like low key find out the ingredients because I'm like, I like cooking. So like, I got to figure out this recipe. Yeah. So I went back home and I started just doing some attempts. And then so I made it for my 2 friends I was in Amalfi with because they're the only ones who would know, like, does this taste anything like what we ate? And they're like, I'm not telling you this because you're our friend, but it actually tastes very similar. So it's a dupe of that recipe is included in the book, but with a shout out to the restaurant because that's the place you should go. I'm just trying to give it to myself to eat when I can't go to Amalfi, but everyone should go to that restaurant. So I named the restaurant. So if this book blows up, probably the restaurant's gonna blow up.
No, you have to be one of my favorite people ever. This is the most. I can't even.
I am very random. I think.
No, it's so good. It's so okay. Your book is so cute, and it's just such a joyful escape, and it's so much fun to read, and it just like makes me want to travel. But the fact that you've done so much extra legwork for everybody and given them this itinerary and places to stay and things to do, and how to ensure that you could do it in a day, and then recipes like. You're just going above and beyond.
My dream is for, okay, listeners, my dream is for you guys after you're done reading the book to try to make the recipe, take photos on Instagram and tag me in it so I can share everyone's plates of lemon.
I'm making it this week.
My God, yeah.
No, well, actually, you need to send me a picture of the recipe because I don't have a copy of the book yet.
You know what? I'm going to DM it to you like today.
Please. And I'm going to make it and I'm going to post it. I'm so excited. I'm going to post it with my copy of the book when it comes.
Oh my God. Yes. This is my dream because I also like as a hobby, like enjoy cooking and baking. So getting to incorporate that into the book was also such a fun bonus for me. And part of my trip next week is we're going to Amalfi again. And so I'm going to try to go to that restaurant again, but everyone stay tuned. Hopefully I can get a table.
I'm just going to be like stalking your Insta, like no for the updates. Like, where is that lemon pesto pasta? Okay. So now that you're going on vacation, very excited for you, but like, are you working on another book? Like everyone's going to want to know what's going on next for you.
A lot of people, lovely readers who are excited about this book, who read 24 Hours in Paris, are like, where's the third one going to be? Where is it going to be set? And, this is a discussion as well that I had with my editor. They were very open to a third, like nice, tidy 3-book series. And this was one of those moments for me where I thought about movie series, shows that I love. And I thought about ones that were just one season too long. And it's like, it should have ended one before for the quality of it. And so that was very important to me. So this is the end of this series.
So it's almost like Friends. Friends, the TV show, ended at the perfect time. And people like wishing that there was more, but like, no, it had to end on a high.
You don't need a reboot. Just go back and watch.
Exactly. Yeah, I really respect that decision.
It was a hard decision to make because, as someone who came from the self-pub world and all the rejections, how nice would it be to lock in another contract right away and know that I'm all set? But I was like, you know what? I will thank myself later. And just the passion of writing is so important to me. And so to answer your question, later in the summer, like when the dust settles from the launch, and I'm going to try to just read as much as I can, get re-inspired. And I'm hoping late summer, early fall, I'm going to write my next draft, whatever it is. it'll definitely have a romance element, even if it's not fully a romance book. Because sometimes I like a romance with like a little time travel element or
Yeah.
something else, like to add flavor. I just don't know what that is yet, but I hope that readers who enjoy this series will come along with me for the ride. So yeah.
Sure they will, me included. I'm so excited. Take a much needed break. You've been doing this for so long. You've been living with this story world for so long in so many different like variations. So it'll be so nice to take like a break from it and
I
like
need to like calm down and take an actual break. I said to one of my friends the other day, I'm like, yeah, after the launch, I'm probably gonna take like a 5 day social media break. And she's like, 5 days? Like, what is
yeah,
wrong with you?
yeah. That's amazing.
I'm way too much.
I selfishly hope like you don't take a break because I need content from your trip.
Oh, it'll probably only be like 3 days. Let's
I'm
be
good.
real.
Okay, well, this was so much fun. Congratulations on this.
Ditto.
I
Thank you.
loved this conversation and I'm so excited to see like what's coming down the pipeline. But more importantly, I really can't wait to stalk you on your trip.
Hey, I welcome all stalking, voyeurism, what have you.
I love
Can't
it.
wait. So thank
Well,
you so much for having me. I love your podcast, love everything you do on IG. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to me.